Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the My Footballing Journey series. Today I'm joined by Tony Sharkey. Tony's been involved in the professional game for over 20 years in many roles and capacities. He joins us today to discuss his journey in the game, his thoughts on the modern world of football, and much more. Tony, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Joe. Yeah, great to be on. I talk about football in my private life and my professional life, so it's a good topic I'm on to today.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant to have you here. We've had a really wide range of guests, on the podcast so far in the first 11 episodes. The whole idea is about journeys. It's about showing
Mm.
people that are looking to work in the game how you can get in, the many different routes into the game, and then also how you can stay in the game and adapt yourself. So, as I mentioned, journeys. Let's start at the beginning of your journey. Let's go right back to the start. How did the whole journey in football begin for you?
So listen, it started probably I left school at 16, and joined Leeds United as an apprentice back in the day, and that was, the cleaning boots type of thing. And I'd been a Leeds fan growing up. I didn't want to do anything else but be a professional footballer, so it was sort of my dream come true. I got a year's pro contract. This is the early 80s we're talking about, so it's going back a bit. That went reasonably well. Played a lot of reserve football, but never broke into the first team. I was released at 19, went back to Middlesbrough, my hometown, and I sort of licked my wounds, didn't know what I was going to do. Went back to college and studied a couple of A levels and ended up going to do a PE degree. It was Brighton Poly at the time. It's now the University of Brighton. But I did a 4-year PE degree, even though I didn't want to be a teacher. There's loads of courses out at the moment, and UCFB and lots of different universities have courses that are very football relatable and football specific. And if there was something like that at the time, I'd have absolutely loved to have done something like that. But I did a PE degree for my sins. Interestingly, a few years below me in the same place was Dan Ashworth, the sporting director, who obviously you'll know Joe. He's one of the sort of top sporting directors in the business, and he started doing a PE degree. He started teaching. I think he did a bit of teaching before he got into to club working in clubs. So I did my PE degree, and then after that, I was like, right, what do I want to do? So I did some sports development work, which was great for local authorities in the north of England. I managed a small team of people who were doing, not just football, it was multi-sport. It was getting old people into fitness. It was getting young people. It was people with special needs. It was the whole range of getting people into sport and getting people active. And that was, that's a really rewarding part of my sort of career history. But I just felt I wanted to work in football. And look, Joe, it's look, you guys, if you're thinking of working in football, it's a really difficult industry to get into, and anyone who's got into it has their own story and their own way of doing it. And I bet and I guess it will involve a lot of hard work, a lot of networking, and a bit of luck.
Yeah.
And that's certainly true for me, Joe.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think of you're the 12th person we spoke to on this podcast, and I think everybody, there has to be that element of luck sprinkled into the conversation, and
Mm.
whether that's perchance meeting somebody, or whether it's coming across something that maybe other people didn't. Obviously, like you say, though, a lot of hard work. So, when was
Yeah.
that moment where you kind of stepped into the world of football properly, in inverted commas?
Probably. Well, I played semi-professional throughout my sort of 20s and early 30s, but I just got it into my head that I wanted to get into football, and I'd sort of looked at coaching, and I'd done my cruciate earlier on in my footballing career,
Mm.
and I did it again on a UEFA B coaching
Oh,
course when I was just crossing balls. It was something like really, like a freak accident. So I thought, oh, maybe the coaching isn't going to be for me. And I just thought the football agency side seemed really interesting. There wasn't a great deal of information out there and how do you get into it type of thing. You know, and that was a problem. But I used some of my connections, people I knew, I used sort of my network to learn about the industry, to learn what you had to do to become a football agent. It was almost like it took me about a year and a half before I made the plunge and took the FIFA football agent exam, which was in 2002. Passed it first time, but that isn't, you know, getting your football agent's license isn't the be all and end all. That's just the beginning. So what I started to do was I was based up in Newcastle at this point, and my sort of first sort of business model was to send young players from the Northeast to clubs on trial throughout the country. So 16, 17, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds who hadn't been picked up or been released, I'd be getting them trials all over the place. And I had a reasonable amount of success. And it was funny because I'll go back to, I had 3 young players down at West Brom. West Brom wasn't the best academy in Birmingham. In fact, it was, back in the day, it was pretty poor. And one of my early contacts worked at West Brom, and he used to say, "Oh, just bring a car full of players down," you know, sort of like, and ended up getting 3 signed on as scholars. And later, Dan Ashworth then joined West Brom in their academy as assistant academy manager. So it was interesting. I was then negotiating deals with Dan, and a couple of them got pro contracts. One of them's still with me to this day. And that's how I got my foot in the door of agency. But it, you know, it didn't pay the bills overnight. So when I first started trying to become a football agent, I got a part-time job as a supply teacher, right, which I'd never done, but I was qualified to do a couple of days a week just to keep the money coming in. And so I could, you know, one of the things which is great at football is you can go to matches on an evening, a weekend. You can work. Football's very much a 24/7 business. You can work all the other hours. You know, I was in schools at 9 till 3:30. I've got time on the evening, you know, during lunchtime to push ahead and try to be a football agent. And I think with me school doing the and to be fair, there's a couple of young players I picked up who were in the school system through me contacts there. And, you know, I was probably doing about 50, 60 hours a week when I first tried to break in. And I think I said it earlier, you know, you've got to put the graft in. And that was going to games, meeting players, meeting parents, building my network, talking to clubs, all of that sort of thing. And that was sort of my first 2 or 3 years as a football agent. And then in 2005, I had my big break. What I started to do was I started to develop links with foreign agents from mainly Europe, who had good players already, established players, but they didn't have the connections in the Premier League and the Championship. And I'd built up my network by then, so I had quite a good network. And I started to work with those people and managed to do a deal at the back end of 2005 for a player to move from Glasgow Rangers to Blackburn in the Premier League. And that deal was the deal that really meant that it had some commission that you earn as an agent on a pipeline, that I could not do any other work and I could just focus on being an agent.
So that was the moment that you managed to, in your head, transition where football became everything. What do you think makes the football industry so special?
It is special. It's a unique business. I mean, the word business doesn't quite fit it, because I think football is quite misunderstood from people on the outside. You know, and I might use the term American investors, but it isn't a business as such. It's somewhere between family and a religion, I think. And in my mind, it's such um, a pattern of the life in this country and in many other countries. You know, what people talk about on a Monday morning in Newcastle is what happened at the weekend for the first team. What people talk about in the pubs on a Saturday night is what happened, and everyone's got an opinion. So, is that a business? No, I think it's a thread that runs through our social network, our social life, our community. And some people, and I'm talking about fans now, not employees, because I feel really privileged and lucky to be in the football business, and you know, and I think that if you do get in the football business, no matter what your salary is, no matter what your level is, and it's something you enjoy, that is absolute gold dust. Because you know, I'm not sort of thinking about retirement, because I'm enjoying what I do. I'm working in a business, an ecosystem that I like, and you know, it's an enjoyable thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's that old saying, isn't it, that you never work a day in your life if you do something you love, but
Yeah.
everybody does love football, don't they? I think there's also the element of, because it's so unique, and I think everybody will say, "Oh, you work in football." It's a conversation starter, isn't it? It's something that everyone can get behind, everyone can understand. There's a lot of new wave industries where, if you work in tech or IT or coding, you say to a grandparent or even parents and say, "This is what I do," they might go, "I don't have a clue what you do." But as soon as you say you work in football, even people that aren't massive football fans, they can kind of understand that process, understand what that is and what that looks like. Whether they think it's the most noble of professions or not, I don't know. Some people have a bit of an issue with the amount of money in football. Do you think there are
Yeah,
a lot of conceptions about that?
yeah, there's loads of misconceptions, and part of so I do some football agent courses as well as other things, and I started that in 2016 because there's a lot of misconceptions about what a football agent does, what the job is, what your day-to-day entails, how you what your relationships with clubs, what your relationships with players and others. And there's so many misconceptions. And the same for scouting, Joe. You know, scouting to one person in the industry can look a lot different to another, in how it's actually done and how it's delivered. So yeah, there is a lot of misconceptions, but you know, a lot of people like talking about football. They like hearing, behind you've seen these sort of behind the scenes documentaries, haven't they, and how popular they are
Yeah.
on Netflix. People want to understand that they don't just, I think fans are quite well educated. That they
Yeah.
want to know what's under the bonnet. They don't just want to
That's
see the
yeah.
car.
It's
They want
interesting,
to know
isn't
what's
it?
under the bonnet.
As a baker in a bakery, nobody comes in and says, "Well, I wouldn't do that with that bread." Nobody thinks
I
that they
do
could
actually.
do.
I do. I do.
At the end of the day, if you go to a sandwich shop to buy a sandwich, it's because you haven't got time to make a sandwich. You're not going, "Oh, I could do a better job than this." And
Yeah.
whereas I think when people watch football, I think they feel a type of ownership over it, and they feel an education to a point where, well, I could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No. No. Absolutely. And look, what I've found is that um, it's actually delivering on what you say you're going to do. So in the football agent world, you can be a great agent, but if you're not doing you're working hard for your clients, and you're not they're not in the football business, or the drop out and they don't get a club, then you're not sort of delivering. But it's I think getting it across to people who haven't seen the other side of the business is quite tough, because they're there watching the match.
Mm.
They're there for entertainment. They're there to watch the
Yeah.
players. They're there to see, people doing incredible things with a football.
Well, and as you say with these documentaries, they're now actually seeing the process as well. They're watching you bake the bread. They're not
Yeah,
just buying it in the shop. They're actually seeing
yeah,
how that all comes together.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's got to be good for the game. You don't have to. delve deeper if you don't want to, but a lot of people, yeah, the question I always get asked was how I got into the football agent business, and I've sort of given you a bit of a run through of it,
Mm.
but it probably took me 5 years
Yeah.
from having the idea of I want to become a football agent, and I was in me mid 30s. So it took me 5 years to become a full-time proper,
Yeah.
doing it full-time agent. So it didn't happen overnight. And I think one of the things we talked about, that bit of luck, I worked hard in that 2005 transfer window, as I'd done in all the other ones. And I just got that bit of luck. And I think it was a quote by Lee Trevino, and he said, the more I practice, and like on his putting, on his short chips, on whatever, the more I practice, the luckier I get.
Mm.
And I thought that was lovely because I knew I was working hard. I wasn't potentially getting the payback, and then all of a sudden you get the Premier League
Yeah.
deal,
Yeah.
and it goes from there.
Tell us a little bit about Zurab. Obviously, you've touched on it a bit there, and I know that you were in Georgia recently and had a trip over there. I'm
Yeah.
just really interested in that and what's been going on over there and your take on European footballers in this country in the modern day.
Yeah. So um, the deal in question was for a player um, who left Rangers. Alex McLeish hadn't wanted to keep him, but he left. He went to Blackburn Rovers in the Premier League. Did really well. He's now assistant. He's retired some years ago. Um, we're more like friends than client. I've helped him a lot in this country. Obviously, English wasn't his first language. He's a Georgian national,
Mm.
clever guy, speaks quite a few languages as well. He's now assistant national team coach, and I've been over a couple of times to Georgia, and they've got some really talented footballers. Perhaps the academy system in Georgia isn't anywhere near as developed as ours. And they qualified for the Euros.
Yeah.
This is the first tournament.
Yeah.
It was an old Russian state, the history lesson, but
Yeah. Well, we
it's
just
now.
had the reason I ask and I get onto is our previous guest was Mika Gabachava, who is
Yeah,
from Georgia, who
yeah,
now works at Ghent and has been at Dinamo Tbilisi there, and he talked about that win and that moment for the country, and I know that you have some ties to that, so I
yeah.
wanted to kind of round off that story a little bit, really.
Yeah, well, I was there. I was there, and then I went to watch the Luxembourg game. It was 2-0,
Mm.
and then the Greece game, extra time and pens. As an Englishman, you're always dreading pens, aren't you? You sort of think, oh, but it's the first time I've ever been in a gridlocked city car situation where everyone's not wanting to go anywhere. They're just hanging out the cars and celebrating,
Yeah.
singing and playing loud music and sounding the horns.
That's the power of football, isn't it? Going
And
back
it,
to
and
what makes football special.
Well, I shared some things on LinkedIn, and like, please follow me on LinkedIn. There was a big pitch invasion. The players then, after the game, all were celebrating, went down to the town centre, and there was a stage. The Prime Minister was there, and they all said a few words, and Kavara led the singing. Uh, so it was like, yeah, it was really good to be in Tbilisi, and look, as from a professional point of view,
Mm.
they've got two or three top players. They've got four or five good players, and then they've got some good youngsters coming through. So
Yeah.
it's great for the nation, for the Georgian, and I'll hopefully, I don't know which game or games I'll be going to, but I'll definitely be going to Germany this summer to see Zura and hopefully cheer Georgia on. At least hopefully they'll get a win or get
Mm.
something out of the tournament, because they'll be underdogs. They'll be
Yeah.
massive underdogs.
I want to go down a slightly different tact now. Obviously, we're going to touch on the football transfer forum a little bit and the stuff that you're doing with that. But I want to talk a little bit about the women's game.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the upcoming football transfer forum, you are doing a women's focus day as well. But as an
Mm.
agent, I kind of want to touch on that market. We just talked about a slightly different market with Georgia. Where do you think the women's game can get to? Do you think that we reach a point where there's enough money within the women's professional game that it becomes its own juggernaut?
Yeah, I definitely do. look, I'm not an expert, Joe.
Mm,
My whole career has been in the men's game.
mm,
Um, I remember meeting two of the England women maybe 15 years ago, and it never even entered my head to sort of say, "Do you need representation?"
mm.
Just because there was absolutely no money in it then. Certainly, women's agents. Um, and when I say the women's game, men and women are working in the women's game.
Mm,
Men and women are working in the men's game, but less women
mm.
potentially. Um, Women agents are now working exclusively with women players. Some of the big agencies have brought somebody in to look after the women players. The top women players can probably earn more in off the field
Yeah,
commercial activity because the stars, and I think one of the nuances, and it wasn't me that said it at our last event at Newcastle where we had a women's panel,
mm,
was that in the women's game, the players have been the focal point, not necessarily as strongly as the clubs are the focal
yeah,
point in the men's game.
yeah,
You support Newcastle United and you have your favourite players, but in the women's game, people are really attaching to some of the
yeah,
personalities that are women players, and that's got to be good. And Joe, what I would like to see, and look, there's going to be loads of operational and other issues, and women's football has to find a time in the schedule to be on Sky or on whatever top TV channel you can get, and football, men's football is dominating TV schedules. So there needs to be a time where the women can show themselves, showcase the game.
mm,
I think the product has massively improved. I think it's not rocket science to say you turn most of the women's teams professional. You give them the best physio, sports performance, coaching, nutrition, psychological, the whole package. And lo and behold, what a surprise! The performance
yeah,
goes through the roof, and it's a totally different game now.
yeah,
Newcastle women have just professionalised this season, and I'm going on Sunday actually to see their last home game. But they're very good technically, very fit, really well coached. And it's no surprise that and the product is improving and improving all the time. What I would like to see, Joe, and this is stargazing. One week the folk of Newcastle, one weekend they go and watch the men.
yeah,
Next weekend they go and watch the women, and there's 50,000 there.
mm,
Maybe 50,000 of a different audience for the women's game to the men's game,
mm,
but each weekend there's a match.
yeah,
Are you going to the men's? Are you going to the women's? It doesn't really matter which one you go to because it's a really good experience for both sets of fans.
mm,
And like I said, there's loads of operational challenges. Not least the pitch. The pitch could be ruined by November. But Tottenham have two pitches on their ground, don't
yeah.
they? They've got an American football, so it's not within the realms of the Premier League money and magic that you could design a stadium that can cope with a lot of matches.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to touch on the football transfer forum now in a little bit more detail. We've alluded to it a few times. Tell us about the football transfer forum, how it came about, and what it is.
Yeah, I'll have to give a big shout out to my business partner Ryan McKnight. Myself and Ryan have worked together for a number of years, and we've worked together before the football transfer forum. And I had this idea of doing an event because I'd been to a lot of conferences, events, and that type of thing, and not some of them were quite good. Not everything delivered what I sort of wanted.
Mm,
So Ryan had the same experience as me, and he'd been to far more events. He was the former editor of FC Business, so he was going to events all the time. And so we sort of curated this event where sporting directors, scouts, football agents, sports lawyers could be in a room, share best practice. So we have speakers. I'm really, really that's the bit I really like, curating the speakers. We get some top speakers from the football business in our little niche, which the football transfer forum is just people involved in football transfers, scouting and recruitment, just those three things. But it also brings in a lot of companies who operate in that space. So, we get companies that a lot of the data providers have been to my event. We had Football Manager come to the event, which was a slight curveball. But, there's a lot of companies that come that either want to speak to agents or scouts or both, or they want to just be in the room and they want to find out what the latest sort of thinking and the best sort of thinking. We've had some really, really good speakers at the Football Transfer Forum. I mean, I think we've had probably 30 odd speakers, and I won't name names, but top sporting directors. We've had some, we occasionally throw in a curveball and have different topics that people perhaps haven't heard about. And we also like to showcase people that we think are doing well in the industry, or we think, can bring something to the party, in terms of being on a panel or speaking. And that's proved really effective.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I've obviously attended myself, and I'm looking to attend the next one. And it's certainly a good process, and you can tell that it's been refined over time. I want to ask you one final question, and going back to the journey, really, which is what this podcast is all about. Your journey isn't over, far from over, hopefully. So what do you hope to do in the medium to long-term future? And one thing I always ask everybody is, are you a person that likes to set goals?
Probably not, Joe. Do you know what? I haven't. I'm sort of like, if it works, go with it. If I have quite a lot of ideas for things that I would like to do, and some of them end up being really silly ideas that I don't act on. Some of them end up being things that I'd like to do. So no, I don't really set goals. I sort of, like I say, I've been in the industry now 20 odd years and self-employed the whole time, which is, that can be stressful because you have your good years where, you're doing really well, and your not so good years. So it fluctuates, and it's never, I mean, it's more or less stable for the last sort of 5 years, but it has its ups and downs. I'd like to focus on the Football Transfer Forum a little bit more. I've got somebody helping me. I've a few people helping me on it, but I think as a concept, it can grow. And whether that, we've done a test event in France at the Tournoi Maurice Revelot, which went well. We were talking to some people in Germany about doing one before the Euros, but that's that's not going to happen just now. But yeah, I think it's probably growing the Football Transfer Forum. And I do get quite a number of offers from people asking me to speak or to get involved with projects. And if it's something I like, and what's really important to me, Joe, is I have to like the people involved. If I feel like comfortable and I can connect, and I've got to sort of build a relationship, and I sort of feel like, oh yeah, I really like what you're doing. I mean, I've had a couple of great calls with companies who are coming to the Football Transfer Forum, and I've really struck up from not knowing them. I've struck up a nice relationship, and I thought, do you know what? I really want you to come to my event because you'll be good. People will like you. What your product that you've got is great. So yeah, I'm asked to get involved in all sorts of things, and like I am sort of in a really fortunate position that I can, I can define what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. But Joe, honestly, I probably don't look that far ahead. It's a classic football coaches. Let's look for the next forum. This forum needs to be a success, and let's look at the next one after that. Let's not gaze too far in the future because you just don't know what it holds. But I think, I've come to the age now where some of my friends who've had jobs, like proper jobs, in like 9 to 5 jobs, and working, they've retired now. I won't be retiring. Probably football will retire me when I've got nothing more useful to give, or nobody wants me to do
Is
anything, or
that
nobody
important
wants.
to you to have impact and to affect things?
Yeah, it is. I like to I like to try and I do football agents courses as well through ASA Football Agent Education, and partly one of the reasons for starting them was there's a lot of people asking me how to get in the football
Mm,
business, the agency business, but also I want to, we lecture myself, Ryan, and we had obviously you came to one of the UCFB sessions, and we do sessions at UCFB so that the next generation of people who are into football really understand and get what an agent does, so that will help them in their career, whether they become an agent or they're working in football on the other side of the desk. And I do want to challenge perceptions, and I genuinely, if I go to a meeting and somebody says something about an agent or makes that sort of, oh, they're just in it for the money, or they're taking money out of the game or whatever, I'll say, well, actually, this is what the situation really looks like. And, there is a 1% of super agents who are making an absolute fortune in the business,
yeah.
and they've obviously done very well for themselves. I'm not in that category by any stretch of the imagination, but they've worked hard for that, and there's reasons why they're at the top of the tree. And I'm not jealous of that. Good luck to them. There's a lot of players out there. There's most players need and want an agent, so there's plenty of the pie to sort of go around.
Yeah. No, I think that's very true. I think this whole conversation has been very insightful. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. I
Yeah.
hope that you guys on the Patreon page and anyone that happens to be listening on YouTube and Spotify has taken something from this conversation.
Yeah.
As Tony mentioned, please, use the power of LinkedIn, get on there, connect with himself and
Joe,
myself.
I was going to say I didn't really give LinkedIn the sort of
Mm,
the prominence I think it needs, because I was never a social media person, and I've used LinkedIn for the last sort of 10 years, and it's been fantastic for me.
yeah,
It's my shop window, if you like, and that's
100%.
and if people are looking to get in the football business, get your LinkedIn page sorted out, make it look professional, make it look like a football thing. You don't want to be telling people that you work at, a supply teacher at Blythe Primary or whatever, like I was.
Yeah,
You want it to be football related. You want all your qualifications on there that are all football related. And, if
definitely.
you've got scouting experience with Joe, then brilliant, get it all in so it looks attractive to people. Because the people that check in, it's like your CV, isn't it?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's very, very, very accurate advice. Well, thank you to everyone that's listening. This has been episode 12 of the My Footballing Journey series. Thank you, Tony, for joining us.
Yeah, no problem, Joe. My pleasure.
Awesome. Pleasure to have you, and I will catch you next time.